Today we're going to be looking at the second part of properties of exponents. So the first rule that we're going to look at today is power to a power rule. So when you are raising a power to a power, you're going to multiply the exponents. So when you have a power, so an exponent raised to an exponent, multiply. So you're going to have the first exponent m times n. So let's look at this example. X squared raised to the 8th power. You're going to multiply 2 and times 8. 2 times 8 is 16, so we get x to the 16th. Here we have y to the negative third raised to the negative fourth. Multiply negative 3 times negative 4. Negative and negative make a positive. 3 times 4 is 12, so we have y to the 12th. The next rule is product to a power rule. So inside your parentheses, you're going to be multiplying and it's going to be raised to an exponent. So here you are going to distribute the exponent to each thing inside the parentheses. So we're going to take this exponent and distribute it to everything on the inside. So this 3 is distributed to the 4. So we get 4 to the third. The 3 gets distributed to the x to the third. So we're going to have, when we rewrite it, x to the third raised to the third. Then the exponent goes to the y, so we get y to the third. And lastly to z to the third. And now we're going to simplify. We have power raised to a power, you multiply. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 to the third, we're going to simplify, which gives us 64. And bring out everything else as is. Okay. The next one, we have 7xy to the negative second, all raised to the negative second. So there's two ways you can do this problem. We're going to do it one way, and then the next problem I'll show you the other way to solve it. So you can choose either way. For this method, we are going to distribute the negative second to each thing on the inside. So we get 7 raised to the negative second. Goes to the x to the negative second. And then to the y. We get y to the negative second raised to the negative second. Simplify. We have negative exponents, so we need changes to a fraction. 7 to the negative second, we're bringing down. X to the negative second, we're bringing down. Let's see if we need to bring down our y. Here when we multiply, a negative times a negative is a positive, so we're going to get positive power. So we're going to positive 4. So y to the positive 4, that's going to stay put on top. 7 to the negative second goes to the bottom and becomes positive. So 7 squared gives us 49. And then x to the negative second comes down and becomes positive. So we get y to the 4th over 49x squared. This next problem set out the same exact way. So instead of distributing the negative 2, we are going to go on and make this a positive exponent. So we're going to change it to a fraction and move down the entire thing because it's negative to the bottom. So 6 x to the negative second, or negative 6, y to the negative 7th, and z to the 0. This whole thing was raised to the negative second, but we moved him down to the bottom so it becomes a positive second. Placeholder 1 on top. Now we can distribute our exponent in. So we get 6 squared. Distribute it in. When we distribute, we multiply. X to the negative 6 times our 2, negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. So we get x to the negative 12. Y to the negative 7th raised to the second. Negative 7 times 2 is negative 14. And then z to the 0 is 1, so it cancels out. Placeholder 1. We have negative exponents, so we need to move them. It's on the bottom, so I'm moving to the top. So we get x to the 12th, y to the 14th, since we moved on, became positive, over 6 squared, which is 36. Okay, now let's look at our last rule, quotient to a power. Same concept as what we were just doing, but instead of having a product on the inside, we're dividing. So we're going to still distribute. We're distributing the exponent to each thing in the numerator and each thing in the denominator. So distribute to the numerator. We get 3 squared. And then we distribute to the denominator, 5 squared. Simplify. 3 squared is 9. 5 squared is 25. So 9 over 25. Okay. The 2 we're distributing to the numerator, so we get 2 squared. We're distributing to our a. So a to the 5th squared. 5 times 2 is 10, so we get a to the 10th. And then we're distributing it to the bottom here. So we have b to the 7th raised to the 2nd. 7 times 2 is 14, so b to the 14th. Now we have to simplify. 2 squared is 4. We cannot combine anything else, so we just rewrite it. The next one here. We have 3, a to the negative 4th over b to the 7th, all raised to the 3rd power. Distribute the power in. So we have 3 to the 3rd. Distribute it to the a. A to the negative 4th raised to the 3rd. Multiply. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. And then distribute it to our denominator here. B to the 7th raised to the 3rd. 7 times 3 is 21. So b to the 21st. Simplify. 3 to the 3rd is 27. Then we need to move our negative to the denominator. So it becomes a to the positive 12th. And then b to the 21st stays put. Our last one here. For this one, you can do it one or two ways. You can distribute the negative 6 in, or you can flip it to make a positive exponent. So for this one, I'm just going to distribute the negative 6 in. A to the negative second raised to the negative 6. Negative times a negative is a positive, so we get A to the positive 12th. Distribute it to our B. B to the negative 5th raised to the negative 6th. Negative times a negative is a positive. 5 times 6 is 30. So B to the 30th. Distribute it to the bottom here. C to the negative 11th raised to the negative 6th. Negative times a negative is a positive. 11 times 6 is 66. So C to the 66. A, B, C, there's no like terms, so that is our answer. Okay, now let's look at some problems putting everything together. So here's some things you need to make sure. There's no parentheses for your final answer. No powers raised to a power. Each base is only occurring once. There's no negative exponents, and all coefficients are simplified. So let's look at our first problem here. Negative 35x squared y to the 4th all over 5x to the 6th y to the negative 8th. First thing we want to do is simplify your coefficients. So negative 35 divided by 5. That gives you negative 7. So I always start when I'm given a fraction, start a fraction bar. Negative 7 is a whole number, so it goes on top. Now let's take care of our x's. We have x squared and x to the 6th. When you divide, you subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. Put it where the larger exponent is, x to the 4th. We have y to the 4th and y to the negative 8. Negative exponent, move him to the top. So we're going to get y to the 4th times y to the positive 8th. When you're multiplying, you add the exponents. So everything stays the same. 4 plus 8 is 12. So y to the 12th goes on top. Let's look at the next example here. First, simplify your coefficients. 100 divided by 20. 100 divided by 20 is 5. We have x to the negative second. That's going to the bottom. Becomes a positive second. We have x to the negative 4th. That goes to the top. So x to the positive 4th. And then y to the 6th divided by y to the 3rd. Subtract 6 minus 3 is 3. So we get y to the 3rd. Now we need to simplify our x's here. We have x to the 4th and x squared. And we're dividing, so we're going to subtract. 4 minus 2 is 2. So we get x squared. Bring down everything else as is. So we get 5x squared y to the 3rd. Okay, this next one. Let's go on and multiply everything, or I'm sorry, distribute everything by negative 3. So we get 4 to the negative 3rd. X squared gets raised to the negative 3rd. So 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. D to the 3rd raised to a negative 3rd. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. Now distribute it to our denominator. Y to the negative second, negative seventh, times negative 3. Negative and negative make a positive. 7 times 3 is 21. And g to the fourth raised to a negative third, 4 times negative 3 gives us g to the negative 12. Now we have negative exponents we have to get rid of. 4 to the negative third needs to move down. X to the negative 6 needs to move down. And d to the negative ninth needs to move down. So let's go on and move those down. 4 to the negative third. When we move them down, we get positive third. So 4 to the positive third is 64. Then we have x to the positive 6th and d to the positive 9th. Now, let's look at our denominator. Y to the 21st stays. And g to the negative 12th, we have to move him up. It becomes g to the positive 12th. Now, there's nothing we can combine, so that is our final answer. Our last problem here. Let's go on and make this a positive exponent. To make that a positive exponent, we have to take what's on top and put it on the bottom, and what's on bottom, put it on the top. So we get 5x to the negative 8th on the bottom and 2y to the 4th on top, and it's raised to a positive 5th power. Now we're going to distribute in our power. So we get 2 to the 5th. And then we get y to the 4th raised to the 5th power. 4 times 5 is 20. And then do the same thing. 5 raised to the 5th power. And then 5 to the negative 8th raised to the 5th. 5 times 8 is 40, but it's negative. So x to the negative 40th. Now we need to simplify. 2 to the 5th is 32. There's no y, so y to the 20th goes on top. 5 to the 5th is 3,125. And then x to the negative 40th, the negative exponent, move him to the top. So x to the positive 40th. And that is your final answer. So that is the rest of the properties of exponents. Please reach out if you have any questions.